Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the May 2024 Move to France Q&A. My name is Allison Grant Lounes. I am the owner of the French relocation agency, Your Transformation. We help people get the right visa to create their dream life and create a sustainable life in France. And I also run the group Americans in France and host these Q&A sessions and various webinars to help you understand French bureaucracy. So we're just going to jump right into the questions. If you did submit the questions through the Google form, then they should be in my Google Doc. So yes, if you submitted your questions in advance using the right form, then they are here for me. So we'll just go ahead and jump right in. I'm going to do them in the order that they were submitted in, and we'll see if we have time left at the end for anything that comes up in the Q&A box. All right, Bill, is it possible to get an entrepreneur profession libérale visa in order to sporadically do side consulting projects, provided that one has sufficient savings and investment income so that no income from the side projects is actually needed? I'm at a reasonable retirement age. I have ample savings, but I would like to keep the option of doing side projects. Some years I might not have any paying projects. Can I do this with the entrepreneur visa? The short answer is no. When you are on the profession libérale visa, they are looking at what income is coming in from your business. So you might be able to initially get a visa with, that visa type if you put together a business plan and all of the required documents. But when they are looking at renewing your visa, they're looking at, are you making minimum wage, which is it's just under 1,800 euros per month gross income. Are you making minimum wage from the business? Now, if you're kind of getting there and you're clearly running the business and it's growing, but you're not quite there yet and you have additional income or savings, to pay your bills, they will be more lenient with you and like not take away or not they won't refuse to renew your visa if you clearly have other money. But, they're only going to give you one more year to get up to that minimum wage. And at the end of those 2 years, if you're not making money from your business, then why are they going to renew your business visa? So, yeah, unfortunately, there's no option for I want to sell a little bit of something or I want to do a little bit of side project or I might have some source of income. You either are starting a business or you're not, and it needs to be serious enough to make French minimum wage. So, unfortunately, in your case, I would recommend just retirement visa, and then if you decide to unretire, you'll have to change your status. Okay, Emma, spouse of an EU national. I've been alerted to a change in France's new immigration law regarding the EI, entreprise individuelle status. The law text in the Code de commerce, le statut d'entrepreneur individuel n'est pas accessible aux étrangers ressortissants de pays non membres de l'Union européenne, d'un autre État partie à l'espace économique européen ou de la Confédération suisse ne disposant pas de titre de séjour les autorisant à exercer sous ce statut. So this means that unless you are an EU, EEA, Swiss national, you are going to have or request the auto entrepreneur status in order to be an auto entrepreneur. So this actually goes back to what I was just saying is when you are an auto entrepreneur, they are looking at whether or not you are making minimum wage from your business activity. Like that's the main criteria for renewing and, continuing to allow you to have the auto entrepreneur visa. That's really important because the vast majority of auto entrepreneurs are women with small businesses who are at home with children. And that goes for, French people too, not just foreigners. So the thing that I find particularly appalling about restricting the status of auto entrepreneur to EU nationals is it's going to be really bad for a lot of women who have very low income and who are now going to have no income. So in other words, if you are a UK national or a US national or whatever, and you want to move to France and be self-employed, as an auto entrepreneur, you're going to need to request a profession libérale auto-entrepreneur visa and not any other type of visa. And so even like spouse of an EU citizen or long-term resident or anything like that, you're not going to be allowed to be auto entrepreneur. You're going to have to switch your status to auto entrepreneur to do that. It's unclear whether or not the spouse of an EU national is going to be affected. I don't think it's going to be because those are regulated at the EU level. Paul, my wife and I wish to retire to France. She's already collecting Social Security and I can start. Monthly income of over $4,000. She's in the Gers on a 3-week visit and has already made an offer on a house she's in love with, but neither of us know anything about immigration. Okay, I can help. Are we a slam dunk or was her offer rash? So with that level of resources, getting a visitor visa is not going to be an issue if you're from the US. One possible obstacle, I have a conviction from 5 years ago. Will this prevent me from immigrating? I have no other convictions. My wife's record is spotless. So it shouldn't. It's a little bit unclear what exactly they are looking, what exactly databases they are searching when they take your biometrics and everything. There's no background check required for a visitor visa. That is not the same for if you're starting a company, then there's a background check and you're supposed to show that you have no, felony convictions, basically, or nothing that would prevent you from running a company. But for a visitor visa, that should not be an issue. It would be an issue if you want to apply for French citizenship, because if you're applying and you've lived in France less than 10 years, they do request a background check from any country that you've lived in for more than 6 months. So you'd have to provide a US background check. Once you've lived in France for 10 years, you no longer have to provide a background check for any other country. My wife is a psychiatric practitioner with plenty of patients here in the US. Would her working remotely with those patients be a problem for the French? Yes. She is not licensed in France. She would need to operate a business in France. And psychiatry is a regulated profession, so that's not going to work, unfortunately. There are other types of, well, really, psychiatry is medical and medical school, and it's very difficult for anything medical to get recognized in France. So unfortunately, the answer is going to be no. If she were a psychotherapist, a counselor, etc., there are lots of ways to do that without even necessarily getting your credentials recognized. But for psychiatry, she would have to stop practicing. Peter, business investor. I have not been able to obtain any information on French businesses to invest into that qualify for the business investor 4-year visa. Is there a list of published companies that qualify for the investment? So I assume you're talking about the investisseur visa, which is the visa where you invest 300,000 euros in a French company and it has to be at least 30% of the company's capital. I don't think there are many lists of these types of companies, but because it would be a company that's like the size of my company, right? It would be probably under 10 employees, probably under 5 employees, really. I would approach, you could maybe connect with BPI France or France Business to see if they can connect you with anybody. Contacting the business school, if you're looking in Montpellier, there's a great business school. They might have connections. So most people who are getting the entrepreneur visa or the investor visa are investing into their own company or a company of like people that they know. Does the business investor require the use of an immigration lawyer to be successful in getting approved? And if so, are there immigration lawyers that are knowledgeable that can be recommended? I would recommend, so for talent passport entrepreneur, we do those all the time. We work with an attorney who drafts the legal documents for the company, but for the rest of it, like we do all of the admin. For the business investor, I would say I am not your person. I would love to try that. I feel like we're not there yet in terms of our knowledge about that process. So I would talk to, if you're going to the business schools, if you're going to the business incubators, they probably have somebody that they could recommend. I don't know anybody off the top of my head. I know several immigration attorneys. I don't know anybody who specializes particularly in that visa type. I will caution you, I've had some clients who have gone the talent passport entrepreneur route, which is the one that we do, who have significant financial resources. And when they did try to start talking to attorneys about that visa type or about which visa type should I get, the attorneys kind of saw dollar signs and were recommending all sorts of complicated and expensive solutions. So you do have to be a little bit careful. Basically, what you're going to have to do to invest the money is the company's statutes will have to be rewritten to include you as an investor and for your investment to go into the company, and you will have to deposit the funds into an escrow account. I think our business attorney, he's based out of Nîmes, but he actually went to the law school in Montpellier, and that's how I was put in contact with him. He would probably be able to do that part, and then you pretty much have most of the documents that you need for the visa application if the company's already established. Paula, my son is 18 and went to Paris after high school to learn French. He doesn't love school, but he wants to come back to France and maybe go to music school or just live and work. Is it possible for him to get a visa without being a student? He's a musician, but doesn't have any other work skills. His French is still beginner level. So I would suggest that he probably wants to either be an au pair or he wants to enroll in an intensive French class. There are artist visas for musicians, but if he doesn't have any particular gigs or isn't, going to be self-employed making 70% of minimum wage, then it's probably premature to talk about music visas. There are conservatories, but I don't know that you would be able to pre-enroll and get a student visa. There are some where you sign up for a concours and you audition your way into the school, and so you get a student visa like concours, and then the student visa is only approved or validated when you're in France if you get into the school. That's a possibility. You can look on Campus France to see what the visa options may be, but I don't happen to know what the school program options might be for that type of visa. I don't happen to know what they are off the top of my head. And it's May 6th, so you're looking at enrolling in 2025, 2026 at this point. Michael, my wife is a cross-stitch designer and I'm an author. I also have a retirement annuity. My wife made over 50K last year. I made 8K. Which type of visas do we need? So if you're an author and the 8K was royalties, then a visitor visa should be fine for you. If you mean you're a self-published author and you write and publish on like Amazon or something, then that's an auto entrepreneur. And in that case, you're going to have to, as I said earlier, you either have to get up to minimum wage or not. For your wife, the cross stitch designer, that is more than enough income for an auto entrepreneur visa. It kind of depends on, is this a physical product that's sold? Is it designs that are sold online? I'm a little bit unclear. So it kind of depends how the activity is organized. All right. We are US residents, but my wife is also a French citizen. We would like to visit France 2 or 3 times for several months each time in the next year. Is the 1-year family visa the best choice for me? And does my wife need international health insurance as I would for the visa? We have an apartment in France. Okay, so yeah, if your spouse is a French citizen, then you can apply for a visa as the spouse of a French citizen and you can come back and forth. During your first year, there are going to be several formalities that you'll have to do in France. It's great to travel back and forth, but you do have to be aware that there's going to be certain things that you're going to be required to do. So there's 2 OFI visits. There's the medical OFI visit, and then there's the signature of the Contrat d'intégration républicaine that you're going to have to sign so that you go for a day. And the contract is basically, I'm going to learn French and learn about living in France and respect all the rules of the valeurs de la République and all of that stuff. Pretty easy. But then you're going to take a French test. You may be assigned a certain number of French classes or a certain number of hours of French classes that you'll have to complete during the first year. There will also be 4 days. It's called the stage d'intégration. And it's 4 days where you go and you learn about being French. And I mean, it's designed for people who are coming from all over the world who may grow up in cultures with different values. And then some of them are more on like French food and wine and how does the post office work and how does the medical system work and things like that. So your first year in France is pretty busy. I wouldn't necessarily advise a ton of back and forth travel. Technically, you are required to have health insurance until you get on the French healthcare system, which you're eligible to do after 3 months. When we're helping people, we have a couple of insurance companies that we work with and we can recommend. In fact, I will put in the chat our referral questionnaire. So if you do want us to hook you up with the bank, the insurance company, etc., that we use, you can complete that little questionnaire and we'll send some introductions tomorrow. If we're moving to France to become residents, I can apply in France for carte de séjour and skip the visa. No, you can't skip the visa if you're already married. You get the visa for the first year. When you arrive, you validate your visa with OFI. You just get a piece of paper that serves as your titre de séjour. It shows that your visa was validated. You complete all of these administrative formalities with OFI. And then at the end of the year, at least 2 months before your visa expires, you renew your visa, and then you get issued a physical plastic carte de séjour. Normally, your visa will be for 1 year. Your initial multi-year card will be for 2 years. And then after that, you'll be eligible for a 10-year card. Now, I just want to draw your attention to the fact that the new immigration law does implement a language requirement for this multi-year card. And so if you take the language classes, there's going to be a test at the end now. And ideally, you'll pass the test and you will be able to get a multi-year card. If you don't pass the test, if you don't complete all of your requirements for the contrat d'intégration républicaine, then you're very likely to not get a multi-year card when you renew. Caroline, what visa do I need? I'm single, non-EU American. I earn passive income to sustain myself, have an online business. If you have a business, that automatically means to me you're going to be auto entrepreneur or you're going to open some kind of company. The business is filed as a DBA under a trust. That does not make it better. Trusts are a big issue in France. I'm the only trustee of the trust. So you would need to talk to a tax person about the trust, but trusts are generally a bad idea in France. We did a webinar with a financial planning guy, Alex Ingram, a couple of weeks ago. It was mid-March. He is an American living in Italy with an Italian spouse, but he lived in France for several years, and he helps Americans who are in France, Italy, Spain, and Portugal do financial planning. Now, France has one of the most tax advantageous treaties for Americans, but French tax law overall is not keen on trusts. They're seen as a vehicle for tax evasion. And so if you are the beneficiary of a foreign trust, that's going to cause problems. I think the recommendation will be, and you would confirm this with him or with somebody similarly versed in French tax law, to dissolve the trust and just open a regular company. And there can be a good reason for keeping a US company alongside opening a French auto entrepreneur or an actual French company, depending on the level of revenue for the business. So I would recommend, on our website, we just put up the replays. I would recommend first watch the replay of the webinar with Alex Ingram, then watch the replay of the tax webinar we did with Isaac Bashisha, who is our accountant. I'm going to give you the link to sign up for these in the chat here. But yeah, I suspect the trust is not going to be a good solution for moving to France, but you need an accountant to properly advise you. So my advice would be watch those two replays, reach out to them for financial advice on the trust situation. Once that is done, and or simultaneously, but you can also talk to me about visa type based on setting up the business and whether we set you up as auto entrepreneur or whether you open an actual French company. If you were coming as a visitor, then I would say, the divorce judgment, alimony, etc., would be good for showing passive income, but I think in this case it would be better to show business income, and then we're going to set up the business based on that. I would suggest you reach out about the trust question, but also set up an individual consultation with me, the which kind of business and why question. You have to show your own personal financial resources for the visa application, but you don't have to show like business tax returns or anything for any of the business visa applications. Oren, is there a special tax return form for non-residents? And does a non-resident with French stocks need to report dividends, capital gains, and interest from an account in France? There's not a special form, but you're only going to report your French source income, and you're going to send it to the non-resident tax office. But you don't have to report your worldwide income if you're not living in France. Zora, is it possible to get access to the driver's license training before moving to France in order to study it? Zora, do you mean like the book of the code, or do you mean like our training that we do on exchanging your driver's license? I assume you mean the code, in which case I would say you can purchase the book. There's a book in English published by Fahrenbach Driving School, which is where I did my practical. I did the code on my own using a book in French. But if you're going to be doing it in English, we try to send people to Fahrenbach. They publish a book in English. They can help you to take the code in English with a translator. The prefecture theoretically organizes exams in multiple languages with interpreters. It's really hard to find spots when it's not in Paris. So we actually have clients who are in Aix-en-Provence that are doing all of their code through Fahrenbach, even though it's based right next to Paris. I'm gonna give you the link to Fahrenbach. So they have a book that they sell. They can help you to enroll in the driving test and do practice for the code. They can also, once you're here, you can do driving hours with them and take the code with them, which is what I did. What are some phone companies to look into when transferring a USA carrier to a French carrier? How can one compare or view plans? The main ones I would say are SFR and Orange. Bouygues is also one of the main ones, but it's a little bit more expensive. Most people have one of those three. There's also Free Mobile, which tends to use the Orange network. There's also Sush. Free is supposed to be one of the cheaper ones. They have actual stores now. So I would go with one of those four. I would avoid the other ones that don't have stores for the simple reason that if you have a problem, you can't go talk to anybody. So I would just go on their website and look at plans. And then you want to make sure that whatever phone you're bringing over, if you want to use it over here, it's fully paid off because then it can be unlocked. You have to ask your US carrier to unlock it so that you can put a French SIM card in it. You can also look into options for transferring your US number to an app like Google Voice or something so that you can still get calls and texts. Mo, I am 64-year-old US resident planning on applying for a VLSTS visa, presumably a visitor visa. My intention is to retire to France full-time in July 2026 with my US citizen husband. Is there a language requirement to obtain an initial visitor visa? Not at this time. And visitors are not eligible for multi-year cards at this time. If you eventually want to request a 10-year card, my position has been historically that a visitor visa establishes you as not a resident of France and does not lead to residency. I've heard anecdotal evidence from people who have done the thing of they filed 5 years of tax declarations, they own property, they're integrated into their community, they learn French and have a language exam, and were able to use those things to get a 10-year card. It remains the exception. It remains the exception, but I have heard anecdotally of it happening. So my position on that point has softened slightly. If you want to get the 10-year card, those are the things I would recommend that you do, and the language level is going to be B1 for getting a 10-year card. Previously, it was A2 for a 10-year card and B1 for nationality, and now it's raised for everything. Lisa, I understand the premise of the viager process. However, I'm not sure if there are specifics that need to be in place in order to participate. So just to clarify for people who don't know what a viager is, it's basically sort of like a reverse mortgage on your home where if you're of a certain age and it's very common among people of a certain age who don't have obvious heirs or who have heirs that they're not close to. And basically you sell your house before you pass and then the person pays you a monthly sort of mortgage, but then they don't get it. They don't receive the house until you're gone. I am not very familiar beyond that with the concept of a viager and what the requirements are for putting it in place. You do not have to be French to do it. I don't see a good reason why you wouldn't be able to do it as an American living in France temporarily or even long term, rather with a visitor visa that or carte de séjour that you're renewing every year. I would consult with a notaire on that point. I'm sure there are notaires who specialize in viager. Jen, does the whole family have to enter France at the same time for initial entry with the visa? Can my husband come 2 weeks later if he's at work? That is not a problem. You do not all have to enter at the same time. Since you're coming with a talent passport and he's coming as an accompanying spouse, we can't do his carte de séjour application right away anyway, because we have to do yours first. A 2 week delay is not at all an issue. I would say the only thing, I think you guys already have housing or you have somebody working on housing for you. So my only concern would be if you are waiting for him to come to start the housing search process and find housing together, then I would be concerned that that delay would impede the housing search, especially since you're looking in the Riviera, which is a very tight housing market. But other than that, no, there's no issue. And can we enter from somewhere in the EU, like Italy, or must we enter from our home country initially with the visa? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We will put your entry date into France. It doesn't matter if you're coming from Italy, if you're coming from Canada, if you're coming from the moon, whatever. The date that we will put on your carte de séjour application request is the date that you arrived in France. So if you're traveling by train or plane, like keep your ticket, especially since you won't be crossing the border, just so we have proof if you were to ever need it, which I doubt you ever would, of the exact day that you enter. Dana, is it more difficult obtaining a visa without a permanent address as I would be staying at a friend's home? It depends a little bit on the nature of your relationship with the friend. If it is a friend of the opposite sex where it's unclear what exactly the nature of the relationship is, I have had people struggle to get their visas approved when they're coming over to be with an unmarried partner. Now, obviously, there's a little bit of heterosexism there because they tend to ask the question more for opposite sex couples than same sex couples. It will be less of an issue if you have sufficient financial resources in the bank. For our clients, it is very common that we tell them to reserve an Airbnb or to get an address to stay with a friend for about 4 weeks, maybe 6, while they're looking for long-term housing. So many of our clients come over and that's the only reservation that they have, and then they look for housing when they arrive in France because it's much better to look for long-term housing when you're already here and to find something better. When you come over to stay with a friend or a potential or somebody that the consulate might suspect is your partner, they are really concerned that if the relationship ends, you're going to be out on the street. And so they do really want to see that you have sufficient financial resources in case you have to find something quickly and in case you have to like suddenly buy a plane ticket and go home because the relationship didn't work out. If it is a romantic partner, then you have to be careful about what you say about that in the cover letter because again, like if they think that you're coming over without a visa to, to get married or to get paxed or whatever, you should actually be applying for a different visa type with different motivations. There's that concern about the truthfulness of your visa application if that's what you're doing, or if they think that's what you're doing. Is it difficult to obtain the carte vitale without proof of residence, not having rent or electric bills? Even if you're staying with a friend, you're going to have to provide bills showing that you're staying there. And very likely what they have been asking us for the past 8 months, year, is actual bills showing consumption. So they not only do they want an electricity bill, they want like show us that you were using electricity in the place that you claim to be staying. Presumably because people are, getting a carte vitale, but then not actually staying long term in that particular residence. Angelica would be seeking a 1-year long-term visa looking at southwestern France, Tarn area. That's very beautiful. If someone offered me position as a resident chef at an established retreat in the Aude region, the American owner has her carte de séjour and has lived there for about 4 years. What options and steps would they and I have to do to make this a reality? As my personal objective is to live and work there long term or use this as a temporary foundational position in which to start my life in France permanently, what are my options? So it depends on the salary. If you are being employed as a salaried worker, which is what this sounds like, you would have either it's a low salary and they would have to show that they tried to hire somebody else to fill the position and they couldn't, which is possible because a lot of restaurant jobs, hospitality jobs are on the métier en tension list. So that's certainly a possibility. If the salary is high enough, then you could qualify for a talent passport. So in either case, you'd have to have a work contract with a start date. You'd have to have the information about the company. If it's the lower salaried option where they have to try to prove they hired a French person first or a person who already had the ability to work in France, in that case, you would have to get work authorization. So we'd have to submit all the documentation. They would have to like post the job for a certain amount of time, 3 weeks, show all of the candidates that that applied for the position who were not successful and why your application came out on top. And then once that's done, the DREETs will issue a work authorization that can be used to apply for your visa. Looking at the question. Okay. Jacqueline, retirement visa. If we're planning to move to France in the spring of 2027, when should we start the visa process and when would it be best to have a consultation with you? So spring of 2027, I'd say November 2026. I say November because usually it would be good to have an initial conversation and to get you all the details so that you're ready to start at the beginning of 2027. Usually December, we just kind of are wrapping things up and people kind of think, oh, well, I'm not going to start that new project until after the holidays anyway. So we tend to either have people, consult with us in November and then start in January, or consult in January and start immediately. That being said, if you have a lot of questions about planning for the process and you want to have a consultation with me now or any time leading up to that, I do offer 1 hour paid consultations where we just go over all of your questions. And so, you can put together a plan. You can ask me any questions you want about the visa process, about anything admin related. I can't, of course, guarantee that nothing will change between now and 2027. There are always things that evolve. And then we do, for people who have a paid consultation and then sign up for one of our packages within 90 days, we do allow you to apply the 297 as a credit, but this far out it wouldn't be credited to something 3 years from now. I will put the link for the paid consultations in the chat as well. Do we apply for a French bank account once we have made the move, or do we establish a French bank account prior to the move? In most cases, you're going to open a French bank account after you arrive with your visa. There are two exceptions for that. One is if you are purchasing a home, you're going to be able to open a non-resident French account so that you can either, pay your mortgage or pay your utilities and taxes. And so in that case, we can have you work with a banking partner to open an account so that you can, pay your utilities, pay your taxes, etc. If you are opening a company, the consulate has started requesting our clients to have French bank accounts for people who are requesting a talent passport entrepreneur. So once we get you started on writing the company legal documents and statutes and all of that, depositing the money for the social capital, we put you in touch with our banking partner and get the process rolling on opening a French bank account. You need an economic tie to France to have a bank account if you're not a resident or citizen of France. So that's why we have to do all of the company setup first and then help you to open an account. Otherwise, you don't need a French account before you arrive. All right, so that takes care of the questions that were pre-submitted. Okay, Celia, just saw the replay of your tax preparation webinar. Passport talent visa. We arrived in France December 19th, 2023. Carte de séjour issued 18th of March, 2024. Do my spouse and I need to file in 2024 for 2023? I would say no, because you didn't have any economic activity in 2023. And honestly, nobody is going to look at your tax declaration for 12 days. Mia, U.S. citizen not accustomed to wealth tax. Could you give some parameters around that as a French resident? Tax on all wealth, regardless of location, assets, capital gains when selling assets outside of France, etc. Okay, so first thing I want to tell you is wealth tax in France is now impôt sur la fortune immobilière. This means that it's a tax that applies to people who own property directly or indirectly that is worth more than 1.3 million euros. During your first 5 years, the only property that is concerned is property that is actually physically in France, French real property. So if you buy a huge chateau, you're going to be liable for French wealth tax on that chateau. If you own a lot of real estate, like in the US, for example, none of that is going to matter for at least the first 5 years. After 5 years, you have to start filing this declaration. Very, very, very few people actually pay any wealth tax because if you have loans on the property, etc., you're quickly going to find yourself under the threshold of actually paying anything. We're going to do a specialized Q&A on inheritance and wealth tax. We're focusing on income tax for now because it's tax season, but going forward, we are going to have a webinar on this. The other thing I will say about wealth tax is I got here when Sarkozy was president. I was doing taxes during the transition from Sarkozy to François Hollande. Wealth tax has changed with every single president. So I really don't like to be predictive about what wealth tax is going to continue to look like, because honestly, it's changed every couple of years. And so, especially where it doesn't come into play for at least 5 years of French residence, I don't, it's not something that I advise on really. And knowing how few people actually pay it and how relatively easy it is to get out of it. Gabrielle, how feasible is a move from the US to France as a family with two little kids? Like, how much money should families have saved for a big move like this? Generally, are there English-speaking jobs available? How long do kids need to live in France to receive free college tuition? Wondering your thoughts for young families. So the best time to move to France with children is before they turn 13, and this is for a couple of reasons. One is obviously the younger they are, the easier time they're going to have integrating into learning French, integrating into the school system. There's a module on this in Fast Track to France that our clients get about how children are integrated into the French school system and the tools that are there to help them adapt. So the earlier the better in that sense. The other reason is that when they arrive before 13, it's a lot easier for them to stay as long-term residents, even without nationality, and to get a carte de séjour just as normal residents rather than students when they reach age 18. So in terms of finances, what the visa application will look like is French minimum wage, which is it's 1,767 euros. So I just round up to 1,800 usually when I'm talking per month. That's good for up to 3 people. When you add an additional family member, you want to increase it by about 10 to 15%. And I have a chart somewhere that has the exact monetary figures, but I would just say that 2,000 euros a month is going to be sufficient for visa purposes for a family of 4. What else do I want to tell you? In terms of college tuition, there's no such thing as free college tuition. I know it goes around the internet like, oh, France has free college tuition. It's not free. It's 300 euros, 400 euros. My year that I arrived in France, I did a master's degree. It cost me 452 euros. I did a 1-year master's program, and it also covered a year of health insurance as a student. That was in 2009 to 10. Some schools now have slightly higher tuition for foreign students. That's true. But if your parents have been a fiscal residents of France for several years, then you count as a French resident. In terms of finding jobs, that's going to be the real tricky bit because, as I said earlier, if you're looking for actual companies to sponsor you, they either have to prove they tried to hire a French person and couldn't, or they have to pay a salary that is higher than what 90% of French people make. All right, somebody else is asking about French bank accounts. We talked about that. If you're buying a home or opening a company, yes. Otherwise, you have to wait till you get here. Alexander, I'm a UK citizen, have been in receipt of state disability benefits since 2001. I have an engineering degree, learned French, and visited a number of times to eventually move. If I wanted to move to France and use my qualification to earn a living, what kind of visa would I need? So if you're working in engineering, those are the types of companies that would be likely to sponsor you for a visa. Engineering companies would have high enough salaries in some cases that they would be able to sponsor you, or your qualification is sufficient that it would be fairly straightforward for them to get you work authorization if the salary weren't high enough. If you haven't already, you say you've learned French. If you haven't already, I would take an official French test like the DELF or the DELF. Those probably didn't sound that different, so I'll put it in the chat. DELF is the Diplôme d'études en langue française. It's the B1, B2 intermediate language exam. The DELF with an A is the Diplôme approfondi en langue française. That's the C1, C2 exam. I would take one of those to, prove your French level so that you can put it on your CV when you're reaching out to companies. Those diplomas are valid for life, so it would also facilitate the process if you were requesting a multi-year carte de séjour or applying for nationality one day, you would be able to use those exam results that you already have in order to, to put in your application. A follow-up to the cross-stitch design question. My visa would depend on whether I sell my designs online or physical products. I sell both. I have an Etsy shop on which I sell PDFs, but my designs are also sold as physical products in brick and mortar stores, as well as online stores in the US and internationally. Yeah, so in that case, yeah, we would want to show that there's a potential for some of these designs and things being sold in France. And I would say that that's probably an auto entrepreneur visa application. How much is required to open up a French bank account, and by when if my timeline is to move to France in March 2025? So, like I said, unless you own a home or open a company, you're not going to be opening a French bank account before you arrive. When you open a French bank account, there is a minimum initial deposit that you're going to want to make. Typically, that's about 300 to 500 euros, depending on the bank. They'll tell you that's just to open, to sort of validate and confirm the account. They have a minimum, they have a minimum starting balance for opening the account, and then, it depends. You don't have to show funds in a French bank account in order to get the visa, unless, as I said, you're opening a French company. I do want to say, though, that once you arrive in France, it is really important to have a French bank account. The French prefectures have been coming back more and more requesting bank statements in French for visa renewals that we have done online. When we're requesting people's carte de séjour for our clients, the consulate or the prefecture has consistently been coming back to us and saying, please send us documents in French with euros. And if people have been, using Wise or only transferring, only keeping like 300 euros in their French account, or, mostly using their US account with a US credit card and not transferring money to France at all, then that causes a real problem. Because if you've got a 25-page bank statement in US dollars and in English that suddenly they're asking you to get translated, that's going to be a big pain in the neck and it's going to be very expensive. So we have been priming our clients, and we'll tell you this too, start early in the year when your French bank account gets opened. Either you want to keep, French net minimum wage in it, so 1,400 euros times 12, it's about 17,000 euros. Either you just want to keep an amount like that in it, and if it goes up or down a little bit, like that's fine. Or you want to make sure that there are regular identifiable transfers into your French bank account of at least 1,400 per month. One of the currency transfer partners that we work with, we do advise that if you are planning on buying a home, if you are planning on moving a significant amount of money, we do advise talking to one of our currency transfer partners for a couple of reasons. One is that they can get you a better exchange rate by locking it in early. You can lock in an exchange rate if you're planning on buying property and then fund the exchange at a later time. If the exchange rate is really good today on May 6th, but you're not going to buy a property until December, you can get that exchange rate now and pay in the money later, for example, with the currency partners that we work with. And when you are buying a property at a couple 100,000 euros, 1 to 2 cents on that exchange rate is going to be several hundred, if not thousand euros. So, we work with a currency partner who will do, free consultations with you to determine, when you should open an account and what your needs might be. You can keep money in those currency accounts. You can exchange the currency from one to the other, when the rate is good. And so and then you can transfer directly from one of those accounts to a notaire if you're buying a property, or if you are opening a company. We have people transfer their social capital directly, for example. Typically, it's a much better exchange rate than working with a bank. You're going to pay, the banks tend to build in about 3 to 4% into their exchange rate from what I've seen. So, you can hold money in a currency account in euros in anticipation of buying your property or doing whatever you need to do in order to arrive in France. Is traveling to France to study there as a university student a way which can help make the transition to moving there permanently easier? I'd be an older student in culinary school. So here's my thoughts on a student visa as an older student. When you are even in your 30s, going to a school isn't necessarily going to be a big deal, right? You can do a program for a year, maybe two, and then potentially get a company to sponsor you. Now, note that if you're in a program that is not a degree program, you don't have that extra year to look for a job, and you don't get any special advantages in switching your visa to a salaried visa type. So if you're in a program like a culinary school, you're going to need a job that can sponsor you. And that's not evident, especially in those types of professions, which are not known for being super well paid. That's thing one to consider. Once you hit your 40s, I want you to be really careful about student visas because even if you're in a degree program, like there are lots of people who come to me and who say, oh, well, I want to get a job in France, but it's too hard to get sponsored. So I'm going to do a 2-year master's program. Then I'm going to do the recherche d'emploi création d'entreprise for 1 year that lets me look for a job. And then I'm going to find a job in France. A couple of things about that. And I just want to be really honest with you. There is a shocking epidemic of especially women, but men and women, but especially women who mysteriously lose their jobs at about age 50. There's a lot of ageism and especially misogynistic ageism in France in hiring. I cannot tell you, I follow like all of the HR sort of, consulting things. Welcome to the Jungle is a big one that I follow on social media. And I mean, they do whole series of videos about like hiring seniors starting at age 45. So I would say, unless you have like really, really super specialized skills, or you're going to do an MBA or something, I would really caution you about whether or not student visa is the best path. Because if you don't get sponsored at the end of that recherche d'emploi création d'entreprise, at that point, it's either self-employment or going home, right? So I think it's really important to be aware of that issue. The other thing is, let's say that you do want to find, you are able to find a job that sponsors you. Salaries in France are not high to begin with. And fresh out of school, you're going to be making the same thing as a 24-year-old. So again, depends really on what field you're going into and what your job options are going to be coming out of that field and the prestige of your school. So just be really aware that it's certainly possible. Is it a great idea? I can't tell you that. Is staying in France within the Schengen 90 days over 180 days stretch on a semi-regular basis frowned upon? Frowned upon by whom? At this point, they don't even know. The entry-exit system is going into play in the fall. That's when they're going to start being able to actually track whether or not you've spent your 90 days in, 90 days out, etc. Right now, I don't think anybody knows or cares really. All right. I think that takes care of all of our questions for today. Does anybody have anything else? Follow up to my question about being a student, I also thought about teaching as a new profession. Well, in France, most teachers have to do a concours and have to be French or EU nationals, especially for the CAPES in high school. It depends a little bit what level, but all teachers have to pass an exam in order to become public school teachers. The TAPIF program, the teaching assistant program in France, is only open up to age 35. And the net salary for that is about 800 euros a month. I think it actually did go up. It hadn't gone up since 2010 when I did the program in 07, 08, and 09, 10. It hadn't gone up since then, but I think it finally did get a bump of like 20 euros net per month. So your net income is about 800 euros per month, but it's only up to age 35. And then there's a question of private schools, but then they have to sponsor you for a work visa. All right, so the next Q&A is going to be on Monday, June 4th. Can't believe we're already almost in June. Ideally, we're going to have a couple more webinars coming up. I know we have one on May 28th that is going to be with a woman who specializes in culture shock. She's done a lot of trainings for a lot of university programs on, cultural adaptation and culture shock when you arrive in France. And so we're going to explore some of the issues that come up, how to recognize when you're experiencing culture shock, and navigate it a little bit better. So that's going to be available for our clients at no charge, and then we're going to open it to the public and for a small fee. I'm also still working on getting a US tax person to do a webinar. We were supposed to do one last week, but I just didn't follow up with planning it because we had too many things going on. We're also going to do one on French investments for Americans in France. And I do encourage, if you do have some financial planning or tax questions, to go ahead and watch those 2 replays of the webinars we did in March and April. The one on March 12th was with Alex Ingram. He's the financial planner. The one on April 17th with Isaac Bashishat he's an accountant. We're going to have another financial planning one coming up too. That's more about managing investments across different countries. This will be good for the UK people as well because it's somebody who has experience with the UK, South Africa, and some of the other countries as well. So that pretty much covers what the things that we have coming up soon. If you are interested in working with us on your transformation, you can schedule a paid consultation. That tends to be the easiest way to just make sure that all of your questions are answered and, get to know me a little bit, make sure that we're on the same page in terms of what you should be doing and how. Again, the credit for the consultation is applied as a discount or a credit to whatever package you sign up for within 90 days. So you just get to ensure that you have a lot of advice from me before you decide that it's actually a good fit, because sometimes it's not. And that's all I've got for today. All right. I'll put the link to the consultation again in the chat. Here is the link to the event replays if you need to go sign up for those. And this week is a short week. Wednesday is Victory in Europe Day, so it is a holiday celebrating the end of World War II. Thursday is Ascension, and so Friday everybody is doing the pont, and I'm going to be taking the train down to Lyon. I'm going to have client apéro with a couple of our clients who are based in Lyon. I'm very excited. That's going to be on Thursday, and then I'm hanging out to do some writing and visit Lyon. All right. Thanks for coming, everybody. I hope to see you at the next one, and have a great month of May. And I hope the sun comes out because it still hasn't warmed up yet in Paris. So I'll have to wait for the sun de glace or next week. And then after the sun de glace, we should be good. Have a great rest of your day and take care. Bye.